The settlers were rightly fearful for their lives and property. At Belturbet, County Cavan, a group of local colonists were seized by the rebels and led out to a nearby bridge. Most were thrown over the parapet to drown in the waters of the River Rhone. Others were clubbed to death. It's said that one gentleman was so distracted that he laughed hysterically while being run through with a pike.
Rumours were flying all around the place. Many people simply decided to get even with those who they had had trouble with before. People that they owed money to, debts were simply liquidated by murdering them. People who decided to settle old scores. In many cases, protection rackets were set up, and people went from one person to the other, threatening to protect them, and if they didn't, the worst would happen to them. And in fact, on a number of occasions, we know that people were murdered by gangs because they simply didn't pay their protection money.
The Irish servant, which overnight was undressing his master in duty, the next morning was stripping master and mistress with a too officious tyranny.
What happened was that the rebels would come to a district, they would strip the Protestant of their clothes as well as their possessions. They would tell them that if they didn't leave the area within 7 days, then they would be massacred. So the Protestant community left the areas concerned. They left, in fact, in many cases naked. It was a very severe winter. There was snow on the ground at this time, and many of them did die of hardship, of cold, perhaps to some extent of shock. The Protestant settlers were systematically stripped, clearly with a symbolic intention. In other words, they'd come with nothing, they were to leave with nothing. No one knows for certain how many people died in the course of these atrocities. It was probably about 2,000, although the number of victims soon became inflated to fantastic levels, far beyond the total Protestant population of the time. What is known is that what happened in that bloody autumn of 1641 was to influence events and attitudes in Ireland for generations to come.
Philip Taylor, late of Portadown in the county of Armagh, husbandman sworn, saith that about the 24th of October last, he, this deponent, was taken prisoner at Portadown by Toole McCann, a notorious rebel. At which time the rebels first took the castle, then they assaulted and pillaged the town, and burnt all the houses on the further side of the water. And then the said rebels drowned a great number of English Protestants, of men, women, and children in this deponent's sight, some with their hands tied behind their backs, and said that the number of them that were then so drowned amounted to 196 persons.
This was a massacre which left a very, very dramatic effect on the Protestant mind at the time. For example, it's the only massacre after which ghosts appear, because some deponents claim that shortly after the massacre, for about a week, a spectral white figure appeared walking across the river crying, "Revenge, revenge." And of course, this is one of the functions that ghosts had in 17th century belief, as in Hamlet's father, to cry, "Revenge, revenge," for wrongdoings that were done to them. And of course, right down to the present day, it's the only event from the 1640s which has actually made it onto an orange banner. So it's clearly made a very important impact on the Protestant mind.
I sometimes think a lot of our psychology really derives from that period, though we don't talk about it very much, and it doesn't figure very largely in the history book. Throughout the whole Protestant population, not just the Presbyterians, I think there developed in Ireland a sense of always having to look over their shoulder, which of course didn't improve matters, relations between the two religious groups in the population.
Almost inevitably, the rumours of massacre and atrocity were to lead to acts of vengeance on Catholics. In January 1642,
Members of the McGee family were murdered in Island McGee, County Antrim. In the popular imagination, many more Catholics were killed, driven over the Gobbins cliffs to their deaths.
You can interpret this in very widely different ways according to your modern psychology, according to your modern view of what the Irish problem really is. But there's no question about it that it gives rise to a sense of siege, a sense of beleaguerment. And the siege, if there is such a thing as a siege mentality, and if it's a factor in this situation, and it would be hard to deny it, then it really begins in the middle of the 17th century, by my reckoning.